highest worship. Worship has been integral in human societies for a very, very, very long time. And worship has always been the worship of the divine, invariably. All forms of worship, whether it's meditation, or prayers, or japa, or rituals, even fasting and pilgrimages, all these are forms of worship. There is, of course, a great discussion between scholars, especially in the fields of sociology and anthropology. What is the nature of religion? And what are the uses of religion? How does religion play out in individual and social lives? So there is a divide there, and they have been quarreling about it. But one thing they agree on, that every religion is an evolution of earlier forms. And we may deny it, but yes, like everything in this universe evolves. And suddenly people think life does not evolve. Some of them, of course. But everything evolves. That's the principle how nature works. And why shouldn't religion also evolve? So the earliest phases of religion was nothing but animism. Now, it might seem kind of crude, but it isn't actually. Even today, if you go and live in a forest for a couple of days, camp out in the forest, alone, after a while you'll see life all around. You will see that the forest is coming out alive. Of course, you have the birds and the insects, and then you'll find that everything seems to be alive. That is what is called animism. They saw everything as alive, including the trees and the mountains and the streams and the very earth. Today we call it crude, but actually it's not crude. It's really being alive to everything around you, which is also alive. So this animism has been the first beginnings of religion. Imagine millions of years ago, when people, our ancestors, not people, living in nature, that's the first thing that you experience. So this became the first stage of worship, and they used to worship everything. It's a tremendous, powerful feeling. You know why people kind of neglect this? They will go and party in the forest instead of feeling the entire place alive. So these animistic religions, though they have been superseded, yet they are there in some form or the other with us today. The next stage was, there are all these life forms. I mean, trees and everything, all life forms. But there was one special symbol called the totem. It became totemism. This was a symbol where it represented the entirety of life, and it had kind of a symbolic and magical properties, and people communed around this they also identified with the totem, and that was whether it was a bird or you can say a pole, like we have our Native Americans here. They used to have totems, animals. Amen. So these were not crude, but these were kind of living forms of worship. The third was an inanimate object with some special powers. Like, we have all these, the worship of Shiva, the Shiva Linga, is that. It's nothing but these forms. So these symbols, they always had something, some magical powers which people used to worship. And that was, technically it's called fetishism, but not in the usual, the modern meaning of the word fetish, but it is nothing but there is an worship of an inanimate object as animated and having special powers. That. Then came when there were many special objects. Now what do you do with them? They classed them as polydaemonism. So you can see how stage by stage we are evolving ideas. Then third came polytheism. Yes, all these are alive. There's everything has got kind of some form of existence. And then people started endowing them with personalities. This became mythology, which is an essential part of religion, an essential part of even worship. Now we have innumerable gods and goddesses endowed with distinct personalities. Yeah, like you touch wood. Okay. Even that was nothing but an old form of worship. Now it's become superstition, of course. So the gods of rain and sunshine and the moon and the thunders and the lightning and the mountains and the rivers, all these, this live, you can say, entities are now endowed with personalities, with wills, with desires, and then we spun out those beautiful stories that we have still today. Essentially, this was polytheism. Then we come to different shades of monotheism. Now, monotheism has got different divisions. I'll go through them. One is monarchianism. It's a one mighty monarch, like Zeus Pater. He is, you can say, he sits on Mount Olympus, and there is now a hierarchy of gods, a pantheon. We have all the gods, but now they have different grades. So we have one supreme god, and we have all the other gods there also. So we are getting more classified, more ordered. Then we have something called Hanotheism. Here, this is another term coined by, I think it was Professor Max Muller who coined this term, Hanotheism. And it is, the entire devotion is focused on one deity, though acknowledging other deities exist. You don't have to worship 100 deities. You have to worship the one, that's the top guy. So that was Hanotheism. And he found in some old Vedic hymns signs of Hanotheism. That being said, then we come to theism. Okay, so all the other gods and the goddesses and all are eliminated. We don't want you now. We just want the top god there, Dev. And like, in the 10 commandments, the first commandment is, you should not worship any other gods. That they started pressing them. This is, and Moses got so disgusted with all the other forms of worship, and he smashed those gods and smashed everybody and berated those people and saying, you've got to worship only this one. That is theism. Then we come down to something called a deism. And that's another evolution of this one God who is transcendent and not immanent. Because see all the trouble that's going on around there. What's God doing? So deism became it's very popular because they couldn't answer some of the questions that arose about human suffering and human death and misery. What is this? So God threw up his hands and they said, okay, we will make you transcendent. So not immanent. You be out there. That became also part of theology. And then we have something called Pantheism. Oh, no, he's saying we don't want a God right up there. Let's bring. God is not transcendental. He is immanent in everything. So it is more like a kind of a nature is God. This nature that you see is God, immanent in this universe. Then we have something called a panentheism. It is most of the dualistic religions, they have something like, yes, there is a supreme Godhead, but personal and also immanent. So it's just not immanent, it's personal and immanent, and at the same time transcendent. So in the philosophy of Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya, most of the dualistic philosophers and most of dualistic religions, you will find these thoughts. And then we finally come down to absolutism. That's non-dualism. Okay. Now that being said, there's only one reality and nothing else. So that is the Advaita philosophy. Now, what is the point of understanding all these stages of religious thought? Well, actually, the human mind developed around religious thoughts. Human societies developed around religious thoughts and ideas and ideals and rituals. Every society, every ancient civilization you'll see. Talk about, you can say, Zeus, Pater as kind of, king of the gods. These guys, the ancient Greeks, for everything they used to go to the temples. They were not just warring. Even before going to the war and after the war, they used to go to the temples. And so were the Jupiter, who became the king of all the gods for the Romans. Jupiter was worshipped for everything. Not only in these ancient civilizations, in Babylon and in Egypt and all these, in China and India, but every society developed around religious concepts, ideas, ideals. And today we are missing out on that. So it was essentially getting connected to these deities around. And various forms of these religious thoughts that have come, they have not completely disappeared. In fact, especially in India, religion is bewildering, even to Indians. You ask somebody, what's Hinduism? What? it's a vast ocean. And you ask anyone else and they will rattle off what their religion is. But if a Indian or a Hindu can say, oh, okay, this is Hinduism. No, there's something more and more and more and more. So every religious stage of evolution was retained in India. Every. So you have people even today who are animistic, and they worship the totems, and they worship all this polydaemonism and henotheism and all these forms. All these forms form a huge kind of superstructure. And Vedanta came and completed it. That's why Vedanta, they say, it stands on the shoulders of giants. While in other religions, they discarded them as pernicious. Oh, that was primitive. Oh, that's not necessary. Oh, this. They cut it off. And by cutting it off, they gave up their very lifeline. The moment you cut off your own past as pernicious and disgusting, you've lost your soul. So we have this great evolution of religion from the very ancient. Nobody has taught anybody how to worship. It's spontaneous. It's in the human soul. Okay. Now, let's come down to worship. It's called puja. And the simple definition of worship is the union of the worshipper with the worshipped is called puja. But how is this? Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. This is the highest form of worship. So it is a yoga jiva atmanor aikyam pujanam sevakoshaya. So it is nothing but the identification, the oneness between the worshipper and the worshipped. So you start with the idea of dualism, rise up higher, and then you merge in that. You don't have God and you have become one. This is the highest worship. So today's worship, especially ritualistic worship in Vedanta, has taken the entirety of the Vedic ritualism, the earliest sections of the Vedas called the karma sections, and the knowledge sections, which are the Upanishads. So you have the ritualism of the old Vedic fire sacrifices, yajnas, clubbed with the later development called the tantras. And there are thousands and thousands of these what are called tantra. Tantras have got a kind of a bad rap nowadays. Tantra simply means tantrayati, that which spreads. And there are various deities and various, you can say, forms of worship. So these two powerful, the Vedic with its two divisions and the Tantric, have become merged in today's modern puja. So the nitty-gritty of the tantras, the various, you can say, mantras, along with the karma of the Vedas, as along with the mantras and the meditations of the Upanishads, are all kind of compressed into a single powerful form of worship. Every form of worship is both external and internal. And a classical puja has to combine both the elements. Otherwise, it's incomplete. You should not do puja otherwise. Or you can, of course. But essentially, it is worship plus meditation. So this forms a composite. Now, there are two main divisions here. As you keep on doing your worship, it is called with basis, sa-adhara, sadhara. The mantras, the various mudras, that is the gestures, the various, you can say, symbolic activities there, the various offering, the flowers, etc. the deity, the temple, all these things are nothing but a worship within a setting of a basis. So this has its uses, of course, and this is nothing but the preliminary forms of worship. Then the worship becomes higher, and it is without any external aids. It's called Niradhara, and I'll give you an example of this. So the worshipper at that stage, what is the basis that he or she holds on to? One's own soul. And it is there in one of the hymns. Thou art my Atman. The Divine Mother is my mind. My vital forces are thy followers. My body is thy temple. The puja offerings are nothing but all the sensations and all the enjoyments that have come to the senses. They are like offerings to you. My sleep is samadhi. My walking about is nothing but circumambulating you. All my speech are thy hymns. And then he's saying, O Lord, O Shambho, whatever I do is an offering to you. So you have come to a stage where your very breath, your very thoughts, your very actions, everything has become transformed into a worship. That's a time when you don't have to do formal worship anymore. In the case of Sri Ramakrishna, it happened with Sri Ramakrishna. He's saying, so when he was cupping his water in his palm, you cup of water. You can, when you go down to the river Ganga and you cup and then you offer it to, to the Lord. It's just the water used to run down. You couldn't. And then he was distressed. What happened? Then he asked somebody, so what happened? Oh, that's Galita Hasta. That is, your formal worship has become over. You can no longer do formal worship. You take that water, pour it here, nothing. It's all over. So a stage will come when everything you do is worship. So it's a long, beautiful hymn. I won't burden you with it. Atma te girijamati sahachara, etc. It's written by Shankaracharya. So formal worship, let's come down to again. Formal is daily. It's nitya. It's a daily worship. And then there is an occasional worship, naimittika. Okay, on special occasions like yesterday and even today. Today is a kind of a great day also for the worship of the goddess as Lakshmi. Then you do worship with desires. Oh, I want this and I want that. And you do puja, that also is valid, of course. It's kamya. And then there is a puja that is not ostentatious, inostentatious. It's called a sattvika. And the ostentatious puja is the rajasika. You have hundreds of things around and you can a lot of show and a lot of noise. And the most natural swabhavika, it is the puja that you sit down quietly and do the minimum of external, you can say, rituals and more internal. So that is natural, swabhavika. So what does it do? First thing, it's saying puja, formal worship, both internal and external, quells the waves of karma. The seeds of karma that you have acquired in this and lifetimes ahead, previously. So puja is the very best, you can say, way to clear off your karma. It leads you to liberation. It breaks samsara. It breaks the chain of birth and death, simple as that, and leads you to liberation. And you know, Sri Ramakrishna himself was a worshipper, pujari. I remember a Swami telling me, he has passed away recently, saying, when I joined and then my father and wasn't very happy. But my family were, you know, they had 1,000 years of worship of the tantras, tantric worship. They used to worship Kali. And one day after joining as a monk, my father came to see me, and then he was looking very kind of unhappy. I took him to the temple, and he became even more unhappy. And he was saying, he saw the statue of Sri Ramakrishna. You're worshipping? Saying, yeah, what's wrong with that? Oh, you are worshipping the worshipper of Kali. So he's saying, you're worshipping the pujari. So they were all Kali worshippers, you see. And Sri Ramakrishna had started his real kind of sadhana worship as worship of the Divine Mother as Kali. So I somehow made my father understand, saying that, yeah, the higher form of worship is the worshipper and the worship becomes one. So that was the end of his opposition. He left me in peace. Okay. All forms of worship leads to knowledge. As the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Karma Kilam Partha Jnani Parisamapya. All karmas, all ritualistic karma, dravya karma, leads to knowledge. So every time you are sitting down, you worship. And in our tradition, the worship is pure Advaita. I mean, it takes you from the lowest, reaches you to the highest. Okay. So this is the benefit of worship. Now, even in the scriptures, now we have this idea like, okay, is this the highest worship? Yeah, it starts the lowest. So there's a verse I'll chant because I need to chant it. Uttama Brahma Sadbhava Dhyana Bhavastu Madhyama Stutir Japa Adama Bhava Bhahyas Puja Adamadama. So he's saying the highest form of worship is to have the constant cognition of Brahman alone is real. Sri Ramakrishna at one time is saying, I saw the image, the walls of the temple, the floor, and everything as consciousness. And like a madman, I took these flowers and kept on throwing it all over the place. You're supposed to offer it to the deity. He saw everything as consciousness and saying, I kept on. That is the highest, you can say, stage of worship, when you see everything as consciousness. Then the middling is meditation. Dhyana bhavastu madhya. So middling is, meditation, all these things, meditation. Not the ordinary meditation that we do, okay, but a little, refined meditation. That's meditation is a form of higher worship. And then japa and prayers and hymns, etc. are lower forms. And then external worship is the lowest of the low. But don't worry, They just wanted a kind of a classification. But people think that they are ready for the highest, which very few people are. The idea is to go gradually from the lowest to the highest, higher and higher and higher. Because it makes you eligible, it makes you ready for the highest thing. So these are the forms of various worships. And it's also necessary for us to understand that everything is valid. It may not be valid for you now. You have transcended it. Sri Ramakrishna gives a parable of, there are some people who dig a well. Digging a well in India was a huge, take those spades and shovels and those baskets of dirt, and it used to take months and months. I've seen some of them. And then once they hit the water and you get the water, they take all the implements and all and they discard it. Some even throw it in the well. There are some who, when they hit the water and the well is ready, they will keep the implements, the shovel and the all the baskets of you can say to be used later, spades, etc. Somebody else will use it. You don't need to discard. So all forms of worship have been something like this. You may say it's useless to you, but it will be helpful for someone. No one coat should fit all. Religion should be expansive enough to take every form of worshipper and every form of worship. Otherwise, it's no religion at all. You say one coat fits all. If the coat doesn't fit you, go without a coat. That is kind of, that's not very nice. So one should be able to give everybody accordingly. Sri Ramakrishna also says that the mother cooks food and depends on the taste and the digestive powers of the children, she will give that food accordingly. So here we have a religion, a worship, which is available for everybody at every stage. So all rituals are connected with mythology, and all mythologies are connected with metaphysics. So people say, oh, just puja. Oh no, there's a metaphysics there. So it is metaphysics or philosophy, or whatever you like to say, are made practical first through stories. That's the mythological part. And then they are more concretized and they become actual, you can say, forms of worship. So these three levels of religion, the metaphysics, the mythology, and the rituals, form a composite. It's a complete. So when you are doing puja, you can understand, oh my God, this is not just simple worship. It is one of the highest forms of worship. And we have in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, after 12 years of, you can say, tremendous spiritual disciplines, covering the entirety of the spiritual field, and he went through it very quickly. Whatever shades of religious paths were there, forms of worship and realizations, he could do it in 12 years. And this is one thing that people just can't understand, that what was he doing for 12 years? Is it necessary for him to? Yes. He validated every form of spiritual practice and experience and forms of worship. Why? To be given to the next generation. Because people have doubts about all these old forms of worship and old forms of religion, whether they are relevant or no. They are relevant still today, because people may be, great people somewhere, but when it comes to religion, they are babies. And that's why they become so gullible. People exploit them. Yeah, I've seen some really intelligent people will act so gullible in the field of religion. So this is to kind of keep you kind of organized. So here we have this entirety of your religious experiences now of the world, because he also practiced the disciplines of Christianity and Islam. So he brought all the forms of worship that ever was, that ever will be, at least for till the near future, and has centered them into him. So Sri Ramakrishna is now the repository of all that was ancient and modern, and also which will be in the future. Now, after these 12 years of great spiritual disciplines, what did he do? He worshipped Kali as a 16-year-old Shodashi, but in the body of his own wife, consort, Sharda Devi. So that was one of the great, you can say, events in the spiritual history of the world, when he worshipped her as the goddess. He invoked the goddess within her, the goddess as a mother. And after all these various mantras, he offered all what he had accomplished to her, including his rosary and everything. And he sang that hymn, Sarva Mangala Mangalyam, that we chant at every puja. So Swami Shardananda writes, the worshipper, Sri Ramakrishna, was lost in samadhi. The worshipped Holy Mother was too lost in samadhi. And there, he's saying, they were both united in the highest realm. So like I mentioned, what is puja? It is the union of the worshipper and the worshipped at the highest level. This was shown in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And this will slowly now taken in great eminence and prominence for us all, that this is possible and this can be accomplished. So Holy Mother now has everything there within her. And if you want anything of Sri Ramakrishna, what he had accomplished, now you know where to go. She is Holy Mother. So you go with that idea of a worshipper, and she now will give you the fruits of worship. It's a tremendous, you can say, opportunity for us all in today's world, where we can go and be sincere and get those fruits. And she, as they say, will break the bonds of samsara, of birth and death, and she will set us free. Sri Ramakrishna was very clear. She holds the key to liberation. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.